what is the defining characteristic of each program? What kind of writing and peer interaction can people expect at each different stage?
Okay, yeah. I think each act has the same rhythm. We have journaling, that's our foundation. And then we have we have workshops. So for Act One, we teach people how to journal in the first person perspective through three kind of scenarios that could get them to frame their writing perspective. Message in a bottle, uh, the confession letter as if you're writing to someone you really care about, and then the third one is like a novelist told in the first person. And then the second act, it's written in the second person. But before I jump into the second act, another component of Act One is the shadow work, specifically the shadow discernment, discerning what parts of your journal entries that you're writing about, what statements you're making that are based on the shadow and based on the spirit. So it's discerning what parts of your narrative belongs to the shadow. And that's going to prepare us for the Act Two, which is about taking the shadow and turning it into an anti-curse. But then there's one more discernment you have to make in Act One, which is out of the shadows that you've collected, shadow statements like, oh, I will never be successful, for example. You, the person in Act One has to discern whether that shadow is based on truth or based on a lie. And that part's hard. That's why we resonate, edit each other's journal entries, because the resonations help us get closer to the truth, because we believe that more resonations from kindred spirits, the more likely your statement, your shadow statement is based on the truth. It's not always accurate or guaranteed, but it's kind of like a hot or cold game. Like you're getting hotter, hotter, hotter. But ultimately, you have to decide whether this statement is based on a truth or if you're telling yourself a lie. That being said, when we move to Act Two, we actually take the shadows that are based on the truth and we have a formula for you to plug and play. And that's that the original shadow statement that's called the noble shadow, the shadow that's based on the truth, gets gets reframed into a statement called the anti-curse. And that anti-curse will help the mindset shift in a way that's going to lead us towards more loving ways. Even if the loving way might be to give more space or just let it be, acceptance, but not like revenge. The anti-curse, there's three types of anti-curse functions, which I won't really get into in this thing, but I will say that understanding the function of anti-curse is an important step towards grace, which is in Act Three. And so in Act Two, we teach the journal artist how to journal in the second person perspective. Again, we have these scenarios that improvisational scenarios, like right as if you're directing a scene, right as if you're doing a play-by-play as a sports teller, right as if you are giving directions to a friend. Second person is a lot more action based, factual based, rather opinions. And it helps the journal artist get outside of their own inner world and out into the outer world. For me, it was a difficult act to move through because I tend to be in my head a lot as a writer. But the second act really helps me get into storytelling, which is mostly action and dialogue. And then the third act is going to be written in the third person perspective, which kind of fuses the first and second skill set in terms of point of view. The third act is, the way we do it here is third person, limited, omniscient. So you're still inside the main character's head. You're not really jumping into other characters' heads. But you could weave in and out from action dialogue to inner world thinking of the main character. And so third person, once you master that skill, writing in the third person, when we journal in real time, it just sounds like a story, even though you are explaining or illustrating what happened the last couple days, for example. Like you could take real-time events and turn it in instantaneously into story. And that's a wonderful skill set to have, because that'll prepare the journal artist for the seventh act, which is how to write a novel. But that training, that day by day, week by week, however often the journal artist has committed to journaling on a daily, bi-weekly, tri-weekly basis, it's totally up to the individual, but that's going to hone in on the art and craft of storytelling. We really focus in on the anti-curses and applying it in our real-time reality. Like if I created an anti-curse, I won't, if the curse is, I will never be successful, the anti-curse is, I will be successful, because never not is will, is a positive. So I will be successful. So that reframe is going to help me in my day-to-day reality. So whenever I have a thought that's like, I will never be successful, I reframe it, I replace it with the anti-curse, I will be successful. And then I operate my day with that mindset. I will be successful. And even if I slip back to my curse, I will never be successful, I have an anti-curse to replace it. I will be successful. So it's a constant contending within ourselves and our own narratives. It's being mindful of our own narratives and then acting on the narrative of the anti-curse. I will be successful. And as you act out your day-to-day reality, you are also making time as a journal artist to journal about it in the third person perspective. So it lays out as it's preparing you to write a novel, but essentially you're tracking it as a novelist in the third person. So in the third person, there's only one, there's the novelist. You journal as if you're telling it from a narrator's perspective, and you're completely now the narrator and then you're recalling the events. The protagonist is the journal artist, but the protagonist attracts a level of compassion and empathy from the journal artist, the writer, the person that literally experienced it moments prior or days prior. But there's a level of reflection, empathy, compassion, and insight. Perhaps a lesson could be learned, perhaps a direction can be revealed, an open door that initially was not noticed now is noticeable through the writing experience. So journaling in the third act is really powerful too, because it's beginning to integrate the shadow with the spirit of the anti-curse, the spirit of hope, the spirit of faith, compassion. It's all kind of staggered towards grace. So act 1 is faith, act 2 is compassion, act 3 is grace. But grace needs faith and compassion to actually truly experience grace. I think I read somewhere in the Bible that like faith is hope that is a reality that hasn't, well, I gotta find the quote. I'm gonna butcher it. But basically, faith is hope for something to come. And it's the unseen producing what is seen. But faith has a lot to do with that. And religious people keep emphasizing over and over again how important faith is, because faith is wanting a version of reality based on the best hope, right? So I think it's a good thing. So you start off in the prequel, and in the prequel, you're just journaling. And you're beginning to illuminate the shadow. It's going to take some time to open up authentically. And so that exercise of like the first 13 journal entries in a Mirror Darkly session or with a pen pal is important, because then you get the rhythm, the feel, you get you start developing trust with the craft of being a journal artist. And that's important. So that'll prepare you for Act 1, which is now dissecting the shadows. But we actually do not recommend people jumping straight into Act 1. We recommend doing the prequel first, which is understanding the nature of your shadow, analyzing your shadow, discerning your shadow, like which one's based on truth and lies, getting familiar and building trust and rapport with the community so you can begin to open up even more, because we believe that once you establish a bond, even if that bond is like anonymous or kind of just for this purpose, being a journal artist, you just have this innate ability to tap in to your unconscious state more effectively than if you were to do it isolated alone. So we strongly advocate for joining or initiating a Mirror Darkly session and inviting people to come together in this Mirror Darkly 1 hour Mirror Darkly session, whether it's like once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, however many you want to do it. We are letting go of the mentor-mentee model and doing it more of like a peer-to-peer pen pal based system. Only because I think that's more effective, because none of us are licensed therapists, but that's not the real reason. That's part of the reason, but the real reason is that when you have that pen pal relationship, it's more on equal grounds, and it doesn't pathologize the experience. Instead, it's more of a compassionate being with, understanding, holding space, that type of healing modality that we advocate. It's not a fixing, but rather than a hearing and understanding. And in that context, we believe that true recovery can come from that. So that's where we are.